work properly. Fantastic. And so to that, during this portion, we just ask that, of course, if you have questions, that you state your name, what so you are, and we're trying to make sure we have enough time to take turns. We've also had some questions submitted ahead of time, so we'll try to make sure we get to those as well.
I'm just standing up because I think better on my feet, and it's allowing a little better air circulation. So, but really, this, what we shifted, evolved this meeting so that we lead with listening, and so it really is an opportunity for you to ask any question that's on your mind, folks in the room or online, and do our best to answer those. And if we aren't able to answer them tonight in the moment, then we'll follow up and make sure you get an answer afterwards. So, what's on your mind?
I had a question for Chief Maury, and congratulations to you. So I heard something today that I'm confused about SRO officers in our public schools. So for Evergreen and Vancouver, do we have EPD or do we have Clark County? Or do we not have anybody?
Can't speak for the sheriff's office. We have no Vancouver police officers in the school districts here. Those contracts were canceled by the school districts. I'd entertain talking about getting school resource officers back in the schools if the district leadership would like to. Just unfortunately right now, my bench strength is so light. To come up with 5 officers right now would be very tough. But I would absolutely welcome that idea if they want to have those discussions.
I'll add to that. I've actually had conversations with the superintendents of most school districts. And the chief and I are meeting with them a little bit later in August to talk about what the future of SROs could be. Also building on what the chief said is, even if the superintendents of school districts, one or both today, said, we would like to reinstate SROs, we simply don't have the staff available to re-engage that kind of a program on a quick turnaround. It will take a very deliberate achieving some progress on the recruitment strategies that the chief shared in order to get us to a level of staffing that would allow us to participate with the school districts like that.
I mean, given that I know Evergreen's brought on new buildings, and architecturally that was designed to minimize those risks from outside or even inside. But still, we have quite a few older high schools, Heritage for one, and I think for these schools are in my opinion powder kegs, and I feel that our students and our families need to know that we have first responder in those facilities. So I would encourage you guys to talk to Mr. Snell, and I know Evergreen's working on their superintendent, but we've got to, when you go back to accountability, I mean, how can you be accountable if the deck is already stacked against you, so to speak? So that's just my comment.
And just for clarity, and this is at the risk of appearing to be pointing fingers, that's a message that the school boards should hear as well.
Correct.
Yeah,
Yes, absolutely.
the two-way street, we're willing.
Eric, were those SR positions funded mutually?
They were. The school district actually paid for the equivalent of 9 months that the officer would pick up the rest.
Sorry, just one quick question from the chat. If you could stand a little closer. Perfect, thank you.
So they were really wondering if they're getting their money's worth. Is that kind of the issue, you think?
I think it's more nuanced than that. And I don't in any way want to speak for the school districts, but it's been an incredibly complicated time over the last couple of years. Law enforcement generally, the education environment generally, very complex dynamics there. So I don't, there's no one factor.
Absolutely. Yeah, good. Well, that is a key issue I think everybody embraces. So the more that can be resolved, the sooner.
else? Something small.
I will just say that Vancouver needs to be, my name is Peggy Anderson, Evergreen Shores Neighborhood Association, but I spent the last 10 days in Eugene and the World Track and Field, they didn't call it the World Athletic Competition. But you should be very proud of this gal. She's a graduate of one of your high schools, and on her last and final throw, she qualified for the finals, top 8, move on. She was in 5th place. And the crowd cheered and we banged and everything else. She threw it to get a silver medal. And that's her last, she's retiring. And I really think that Vancouver needs to be very proud of its athletes and schools, and particularly the staff.
Thank you. We had a couple of Olympians that participated in the games, the most recent games, and the city, particularly the mayor, recognized them as well. So,
And she was an Olympian last year.
yeah.
She's been on 4 Olympic teams, but this is the first medal she's gotten in the Worlds or the Olympics.
How
That's
exciting.
exciting.
I love good athletic competitions.
I was wondering about that, Chief. I remember seeing that Maury on a Beaver jersey.
I won't hold it against you.
Was it the linebacker position? That
No, I was the offensive guard. I was the guy that got called for holding.
I remember a couple of those games.
So there were a couple of questions that came in ahead of time. And I'll try and address those and then share a couple of general updates before we transition to budget. So one of the questions was, kind of what's the status? What kind of sense of support do we think we have for the plan to complete an adaptive reuse of the historic library building? The old building that was up until very recently, actually, I guess it still is the operations center for the library district. Help me moving out of that. And the short answer is, as of last night, quite a bit of support. We presented to the city council a conceptual plan for adaptive reuse to convert that building into a community arts facility, not a performing arts center. I want to be very clear there, but something that allows for visual arts, including both 2-dimensional and 3-dimensional arts, gallery space, places for people to gather, very kind of small rehearsal spaces, those kinds of things. And we walked through that plan with the city council yesterday afternoon, and they were enthusiastic and engaged and supportive of moving that forward. So we're going to move ahead with the next steps on that to refine some of those concepts, get the numbers of what it would cost to complete that conversion a little tighter, and then report back closer towards the end of the year. I'm also pleased to share with the group that when we were talking about overall budget policy framework earlier this year, one of the things that the council did confirm is that if there is an opportunity to designate some resources, some one-time resources, funds towards a long-term project, that arts and culture was the area that they would want to do that in. So some very positive news to share on that. That's a very exciting thing. The vision for that whole corner was to ultimately, to accommodate the VITA school, which is the innovation and arts school that the school district built there, convert the historic library building into a community arts and maker kind of facility. And then potentially long-term, that site could accommodate a performance venue. But the idea was to have that kind of arts, innovation, creativity be a gateway to the historic reserve and the officers row and the West Barracks. So excited to see that starting to come closer to bearing fruit. So one of the other questions was about traffic on 28th Street.
We don't have to drill it down.
Okay, because there was one on 28th and on 122nd. So, but we can get you answers. Okay, so. And then maybe I'll share a little bit about something that I think we all have strong interest and concern about, which is homelessness. Give you an update on some of the things that we're doing there. I think folks probably have seen media coverage or the city putting out information on the safe stay communities that we've been looking to set up. There are 2 now that are fully operational. One is on 51st Circle over off of SR 500, and the other one is in 4th Plain on a portion of the former Golden Skate site. Folks in the room are familiar, lived here long enough that you're familiar with that, but it's the city owns both of those. One of them is a street right away. The other one is a property that we bought at this Golden Skate site as part of a planning work for the operations center. We're working with Outsiders In as one nonprofit operator of those, and Living Hope Church is another nonprofit operator of the other. So far, our experience has been very, very positive. We've been able to address some of the symptoms associated with individuals who are experiencing homelessness in those areas, getting people connected with the resources and support that they need so they can ultimately get to independent living and self-sufficiency, and have I think some success stories that we've been able to share along the way. I don't have those details committed to memory, so I won't try and make them up on the go, but we've really seen one of the things about the model that we're using there is that these aren't just dead-end locations to warehouse people, but they're rather intended to be dynamic places where people get connected with resources and then they move on to the next stage of their journey, and then we can help additional people. And so we're seeing that kind of change and transition in the population served in these, and we're really pleased with the outcomes so far. We are looking for it's 3 more sites. We have the Pallet Shelters, which are the little kind of insulated huts that make up these safe stay communities. We've bought sufficient pallet shelters for a 3rd one. We're looking for sites in other areas of the city, and are trying to be very thoughtful, strategic about where those sites are so that we can also address what might be kind of peak demand points in those areas of the city. We recognize that there's maybe value of putting one of those in downtown, which can help address some of the challenges in the most urban part of the city. And we're working with some other private and public property owners to explore where we can potentially site more of these. We continue to operate the Safe Park facility, which is on the former Evergreen Park and Ride on 137th and 18th Street. That was originally established as kind of a COVID response, but it has been successful. It has really drawn very little attention from the surrounding neighborhoods. And we're looking to not only make that one be a longer term, but also looking for another location where we could establish another safe park facility. I think we've all seen folks living in their vehicles in a variety of places throughout the community. So if we can establish a place where they can be safe, where they can get support to and access to services and have access to sanitary facilities, that's where we want to be. We're continuing to work on building the relationship and the partnership with Clark County on homelessness response. Probably about the beginning of the year, the city and the county both ratified kind of a renewed forum for us to get together and address homelessness on a regional basis. It's called the ECHO, E-C-H-O. I don't remember what those letters stand for, but it is an acronym because we're government, we love acronyms. But it is really intended to be a forum that's primarily hosted by Clark County, includes 2 members of the county council, 2 members of the city council, as well as representatives from the other smaller cities in Clark County. And that's a forum for us to look at policy interventions and projects that we can invest in and programs we can support that are aimed at addressing homelessness in the community. So the Vancouver City Council members that are participating in that are Councilmember Diana Perez and Councilmember Keith Carlos. And of course, my office supports them in their work there. So we did recently open up conversations about the potential of the county providing a safe park site that we could partner on and maybe bring some resources and expertise to support establishing something like that in the incorporated area. So another dimension of homelessness I want to make sure folks are aware of is about a week ago, I think, yes, a week ago, the city council adopted an amendment to our camping ordinance, which is now called the Camping and Outside Habitation Ordinance, because we recognize that camping insinuates a particular almost recreational aspect, and many people are living outside because they don't have a place else to live. And this really was focused on kind of balancing the needs of recognizing kind of humane accommodation of folks who are experiencing homelessness with the real fire risks associated with people living in certain areas of the city where there's dense forestation, that kind of thing. So it established an outright ban on camping in the Burnt Ridge Creek corridor from essentially Vancouver Lake to about St. John, St. James, maybe St. John, St. James, maybe between there and Andreessen, but kind of that western reach of Burnt Ridge Creek, because recognize in that area, you have steep hillsides, you have heavy foresting, and particularly as we get a portion of the year where it's drier and drier, we want to make sure that we're trying to minimize that risk of inadvertent fires being set because of folks who are living outside because they don't have anywhere else to live. So we are actually starting in earnest outreach and engagement with folks that are living in those areas now to move them out of those areas. We're trying to connect everyone with resources, connecting with housing if they can, but we also recognize that one of the byproducts of this could be increase in visibility of homelessness because there are a fair number of people living in those forested areas. For their safety, for community safety, want to transition them to a different location, and then of course try and get them connected with what they need to become stabilized and safe and secure housing. So those are a few things that are going on the homelessness front. We do recognize that more work needs to be done. We are partnering with Vancouver Housing Authority on their work, not only with the shelter they opened up at Bertha Ball Place over the old Howard Johnsons that they acquired, but also they're looking at building some additional units near Lincoln Place. And of course, Open House Ministries, who we've been coordinating with, just did groundbreaking yesterday on building an additional 30 units for family housing for individuals experiencing homelessness. So there's some good things happening. Some of them, when you add up those numbers, 40 units for GHA, 30 units for Open House, 65 beds at the Bertha Baugh Place. Each of the safe stays we put up is between 20 and 40 individuals at any given time. So those numbers start to add up and they make a dent. They don't solve it, but they make a dent. And we're engaged in a bigger picture policy conversation with the city council right now about housing strategy, because a big part of what's contributing to homelessness is frankly the affordability and availability of housing at all income levels, but primarily below 80% of area median. And we're engaged with the city council on things that we can do and a leadership role we can take to influence that supply, inventory, availability, and cost of housing. In fact, last night in a workshop, the city council endorsed moving forward with a series of housing strategies that are about changing our land use so that we can facilitate more housing availability, about direct investment through things like the Affordable Housing Fund in developing income-based housing, about getting incentives and expanding incentives on the books to stimulate more housing development, and then assuring that our processes are reliable, predictable, fair, so that developers who ultimately are the primary providers of housing, when they come to our community, they know what they're going to get. So, yes.
The east side has more land than the west side. So when you're looking to build homes, that's why the east side is bustling right now with construction. I want to make sure that the city council has in mind the 15-minute neighborhood that everybody is talking about, the livability. So if we have all this low income housing all in one area, we don't want that.
Agree.
We want a wide, diverse pool of people.
Yes, agree, absolutely. And I appreciate you bringing up the 15-minute neighborhoods, because housing's part of building a community, but also the services necessary, and making sure that we are supporting growth in the community that is equitable across the community, so that we don't have what you just described, Mary, is this area is where all the low income is, and this area is where all the want to support land use policies, patterns, and investments in infrastructure and programs and incentives that grow those opportunities everywhere for everyone. but with particular focus on areas of the community that, because of frankly decades of market patterns or underinvestment by the city, or that there's inequities that we need to be conscious of correcting. The 15-minute neighborhood, actually, the 2 weeks ago, the council did endorse that as one of the fundamental cornerstones of our overall transportation system investments that we're working towards finalizing the policy on that. And that is, so it's the land use pattern, it's the housing investments, it's also the way we get around as a community, and making sure that over time we get better at more parts of the community being able to live in that 15-minute neighborhood. So access to services without having to rely on a car, because that's a big part of, frankly, housing costs. Is if you can't get housing near where your services are or where your employment is, then you got to take on the cost of a car, which is a lot. It's a lot. So
Is the Heights involved in this, your Heights plan?
it is actually. Thank you for that. The Heights district actually is intended to be almost an exemplary model of a wide range of affordability for all income types, mixing in uses, connection to transit and other mobility modes, and then incorporating really exceptional public spaces and amenities. We are, I'll use this as an opportunity, we are in the early design stage for, we went through the whole master planning process. We did kind of the layout of the streets and where the parks and trails and that would be. Now we're taking that master plan and translating it into like a real actual design that can be built. And that's the process we have underway right now. We're probably at about the 5% stage, but we've got a contract in place to actually get the design to a point where we can bid it. And get construction going there. And we hope to do that in the next biennium. So once that infrastructure is in, the sewer, water, streets, paths, parks, civic spaces, that supports the private development too.
It's pretty flat right there.
It gives you a sense of how big it is too. It's big. And it includes on the other side of Divine as well. There's another
Driving range, all right, keep the driving range.
at least for a little while, right? So yeah, Mark.
That was my question is that I know that you guys have been working on the infrastructure of that plan. How far are we from looking and naming a primary developer? Are we still, will it be in my lifetime?
It
That's
will
what
be.
I'm asking.
It will be in your lifetime. So we are, we're still early in the budget development process, but council has been consistent about confirming this as a high priority for investing in. And so I anticipate that we would see movement out there by way of construction and infrastructure within the next biennium. So by the end of 2024, and concurrent with that, we will decide what the best strategy is to get the vertical going, right? And is that we get a master developer in and they are the kind of the umbrella developer of it, or do we, parcel it up and then we, sell off parcels to individual developers? That we haven't made that decision yet. But we anticipate, of course, pending council adoption of the budget would support this. But I anticipate that we'll see movement out on that site, construction activity within the next biennium. So by the end of 2024.
Margot and John. Margot, would you like to go first?
There, sorry. Yeah, I know you're talking about, affordable housing and so forth, and working with developers and offering incentives. But, and correct me if I'm wrong, but like for the waterfront development, didn't you give tax breaks to those developers? And isn't that some of the highest condo and or rental space in the city? So that seems, if you're going to have, high class stuff, and I understand the waterfront's beautiful and it attracts people and so forth, but if you're going to give tax breaks to those developers that are going to make the most money, and then in the next breath say, oh, we want affordable housing, well, that's the least affordable housing. And you gave them tax breaks, correct?
So yes, two questions. One is, do we give them tax breaks? And two, is that affordable housing? And the answer is yes, we gave them tax breaks. And no, it is not affordable housing. But I want to be very, very clear that tax breaks, or the multifamily tax exemption program, MFTE, folks may have heard of that, is not an affordable housing tool. It is a density incentivizing tool. Well, for us to, we have a significant deficit in total housing available, which is in part what's driving up the costs. So we need to build more housing. In fact, we estimate, in order to close the current gap and maintain what we anticipate future demand to be over the next 10 years, we need to see built in Vancouver more than 2,500 housing units every year for the next 10 years. That's all housing, not affordable housing, just all housing. And within that 2,500 units, we need about 750 units that are available to households that earn 80% of median income or below. But we need more housing, period. And so the tax exemption, or the tax incentive program, stimulates more housing. And then we use other programs to address the affordability, like the Affordable Housing Fund, like working with developers on low-income housing tax credits, like using land that we own, like the land around City Hall or the land in the Heights, to subsidize development of more affordable housing. But the tax exemption tool is really about stimulating more about more housing that is necessary to meet overall demand for housing.
Well, is it really necessary to give them 8 years? What's wrong with 3 to 5? I mean, to me, 8 years is a really long time to not have to pay taxes.
Every project's a little bit different. And I'm going to avoid getting into a debate or a discussion about whether it should be 8 or 12 or 3. But I will say that the tax exemption tool can be effective at stimulating development, which is what it's intended to do. And we will be actually talking to the city council about that tool, I think in 2 weeks, about potential changes to that program. And I fully anticipate them to direct us to expand it to more areas to stimulate that more housing being developed.
That's the best I've ever heard anybody explain it.
Oh.
But I've heard lots of people trying to explain that. That was amazing.
Thanks.
I know we're getting close on time.
Yeah.
Question from John, and then also Glenn had raised his hand.
So with the affordable housing units, what is that costing per unit? And can any of the additional excess funds that are currently sitting in investment pools and so forth be allocated towards that stuff to expedite that initiative or other like initiatives?
So I think I understood the question to be, what does it cost per unit to build an affordable housing unit?
Not necessarily affordable housing, but some of the temporary houses that we've set up, right, where we have the Safe Rest Village, we have some of these, right, we have these smaller dwelling units that don't meet the technical codes, right, because we have a code. What's the minimum square footage to build a home in Vancouver or Clark County currently?
I think for a permanent residence, I think you can go down to 120 square feet in the city of Vancouver, I think.
Okay.
Probably want to fact check that, but I think we can go that small. The emergency shelters that make up the safe stays are 64 square feet each. So, and those are not intended to be permanent housing. They truly are emergency shelters.
And what's the cost on those?
Yeah, the cost of those. So each individual pallet shelter is about $7,500. To establish a full safe stay community, including the purchase of all 20 pallet shelters, as well as the fencing and the sanitary and all of that, is about $500,000 to get one of those stood up. That's one-time cost. And then the contract for the operators who are there 24/7, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, the trash service, all that kind of thing, is about $500,000 a year. Those are round numbers.
So the approximately $560 million that's sitting in investment pools and so forth above and beyond our current budget, is any of that going to be allocated to expedite additional components of that?
So the biggest barrier, so much of what you refer to is our investment pool. 500 million sounds a little high, but I'll say it is multiple hundreds of millions. Most of that investment pool are resources that are constrained in their use through because they're either utility funds or other special revenue funds that can't be used for anything other than that particular purpose. The biggest barrier or headwind to establishing more of these safe state communities quickly is not money, it's a location and it's an operator. One of the things that we've learned on our journey of serving the needs of individuals who are homeless in the community is the capacity, the approach, the capability of the operator is absolutely key. They need to be able to run these areas, whether it's a safe state or even a permanent building. They need to be able to run them consistently, reliably, and with a philosophy of how they provide services to folks for it to be successful. And there's limited capacity in the system of social service providers or service providers in our community to take on additional projects or additional safe states. So that's the biggest, who's going to run it? That's the biggest issue.
Okay, thank you. And looking at the March, I think this is the correct figure. It said there's 560 million in the account in the investment pool.
Did you have a question?
Did you ask me?
Yes.
Okay, all right. I couldn't quite hear that. Sorry. I'm going to kind of change gears a little bit and express kind of a concern that I have, and it's regarding the Fourth Plane Mobility Project. And there's no question that Fourth Plane completely needs to be rehauled, and I'm not going to assume that one way is better than the other, but my issue with it is that I feel like we're making many of the same mistakes that we're making with Columbia Street. I've been at 2 meetings where members of city council have described the project, and they've failed to mention that we're talking about repurposing 1 lane in each direction. And I think that we need to call it for what it is and be honest about it, about the fact that we will only have 1 lane in each direction instead of 2 on that section of Fort Plain. And the other thing too that I don't hear enough discussion about is in the study they did, they talked about what the impacts would be to the environment around it. And one of those would be that less people would travel with their car on the corridor, and that they would essentially avoid businesses on that corridor. They would go outside the corridor to do their purchases. And my biggest concern is that is our international district. And that's the last place in the city that we want to be doing that. But I'm not really kind of discussing the merits of the project, but the communication part of it, or the failure of the communication, I would say.
Yeah, appreciate that, Glenn. I don't know if you watched and I haven't been in the meetings that you've been at, but I don't know if you watched the workshop we had with the city council on this project 3 or 4 weeks ago. It's very, very explicit that the project is contemplating repurposing lanes, very explicit. And there was some discussion also about the through traffic on there and what the implications of that would be. And when looking at other comparable projects in other communities that have gone through that kind of a lane repurposing and rethinking of what is now a 4 to 5 lane facility down to a 3-lane facility. It actually resulted in an increase in sales tax from those areas, so there's actually more commerce that happened. And I'd be happy to share out the presentation and a link to that workshop to folks who are on the call now. But I appreciate what you said. We learned a lot in the Columbia corridor project, and we're wanting to make sure that early on and often we're being very explicit with this project about what the range of options are and what the implications are for each of those options. So I think that's reflected in the work that we've done so far.
Thank you for that update. The only thing I would say is, like, if you do go to the project page on Be Heard, it's not very descriptive. So it just, I mean, it says, potential changes to roadway lanes called lane reconfigurations. That doesn't really mean much to the general public. So I just think it would be better. It's much better to have community involvement and a robust discussion around it. And then I agree. I mean, this corridor seriously needs some major changes to work through the safety issue on it. But I think it's just important that everybody's fully aware. And I get the council workshop, but honestly, not very many people in the community tune into those. So, but yes, I appreciate that. I just wanted to provide that feedback because it just really feels like in the 2 meetings that I heard that proposed, it was like the truth was really being danced around, that they didn't really want to bring it up. And that's heading for problems in the future if that's really the case.
Can I provide a response to Glenn's comment to being a resident in the Mark Majora from Rose Village neighborhood? So we had the city team come out and talk to us about the project. I thought they were very explicit and open and direct about play. I am concerned about what Glenn voices in terms of the opportunity to get the true message out about what will be the impact should we move forward with some of these design ideas. And there are so many great examples across the country of folks who have taken a 4th plane as it is and converted into a very multi-transit friendly and most importantly, business generation, business development, business enhancement effort. And if you want to go to the heart of the matter, the Congressman is probably the best repository to see quality research information and results that show when you do these sorts of things, it has the kind of effect that attracts people to the corridor rather than just throwing them through the corridor. And that has been being a resident in that neighborhood for 25 years. I fully appreciate where the city's trying to take this. And when we were talking about the bus rapid transit project, the Vine, that was a big piece of the conversation that said, yes, we've got to get this throughput for people that don't have accessibility because it's impacting them directly financially. But we also have to make some changes that are going to enhance the attractiveness of those businesses. And right now, it's not an attractive place to go and hang like Main Street or something like that. So very necessary.
Yeah.
But Glenn's point, I think, is that let's make sure we're putting the message out there about what is going to be the outcome that we're looking for.
Yeah, quick question, sorry. I have to kick back to housing.
Okay.
So I got a phone call last week. So some of the stuff we like. So I got a phone call from a senior living out in East Vancouver. It's a senior village, and their rent is going up by 40% soon. And so they're having an issue. A lot of those folks are on fixed income. They're having some very serious issues with how much the rent for the ground is going up. So we're having a meeting with them next week, but we'll see what the consensus is from some of the folks there. But that's a very disturbing problem in that the fact that they're going to be stuck between a rock and a hard place.
within a couple of months. So perhaps there's some way to negotiate that increase could be stair step rather than just 100% right off the bat. But we're going to explore possibilities there. Perhaps the owner is, it's the same family, just, I guess the owner died. But anyway, so that's going to be an interesting thing. And that's, of course, how do we keep folks in their spaces without all of a sudden 200 or 300 people, more people are going to be on the
Right.
streets.
How do we support preservation of naturally occurring affordable housing like that, right? And put in things that try and keep that preserved in a state where rent control is illegal and where the city is not able to interfere with that landlord-tenant relationship relative to the volume of rent. So I think the Affordable Housing Fund can play a role there where we use those resources to buy the land underneath something, because the land value is a lot of what drives this appreciation of land value, forces kind of the market conversion of what may be naturally occurring affordable housing to something else. But yeah, that is like a representative case study of what we're seeing in a lot of places across the community and across the nation.
I see 200 plus seniors all of a sudden losing the home that they've already paid for because they can't afford the ground space to put it on. So it's very disturbing.
And next Monday, we'll be talking to the city council about potential renewal of the affordable housing levy, and included in that is rental assistance in part of that conversation.
Is there anything the city can do to prevent investors from buying up housing in Vancouver? There's a report that came out that 40 to 60% of houses last year were bought up by investors. And that is a huge contribution to the housing prices that is affordable. Is there like a tax that we could, I'm speaking as like a realtor myself that work with investors. I would rather have people be able to afford homes and be there long term. Is there like a tax that we could put on investors? Is there some sort of condition that we can put on developers to prioritize primary residence owners rather than businesses and owners and Airbnbers snatching up businesses?
So there are some things we can do to mitigate displacement. And that's kind of the concern here, is that market forces are displacing people, right? And it's the same thing with businesses on the fourth line. Like Mark was saying, that it's not a particularly hospitable place now for folks who are not in cars to access those businesses. But if we make it much more hospitable, then it might displace the businesses. We don't want that to happen either. So, what is our anti-displacement strategy? We do have a framework for anti-displacement. It's called Reside Vancouver. It's primarily focused on residential, not commercial. And but we don't have any financial, like tax tools, those kinds of disincentives. We're prohibited by the state from doing that. But there are things that we can do to harness public resources to, essentially enter the market to buy away rights, buy away property rights, buy away land value, to put those in a land trust that then keeps the land cheap. It's a very difficult, relatively speaking, the amount of public resources that is available into that is pretty meager compared to the investor resources that are coming into the market to buy it. And that's, again, it's not saying it's okay, but just want to recognize it's not unique to Vancouver, that those kinds of investor-driven house acquisitions are happening in markets all across the country. One of the things, and this is a little bit of an editorial on my part, but one of the things I think we're seeing today is a culmination of decades of a policy in this country that housing is provided as a for-profit commodity. That's how we provide housing. And that's the way we've chosen to do it. We do a little bit of public housing, very, very, very little but most we rely on the market to provide housing and at a profit because private developers do that. So there's, I think, a very significant conversation that we have at a federal level about what our national housing policy could and should be. And that's really where the big swing is. That locally, we can nibble around the edges, do a little bit to influence here and there. But big solutions, I think, are going to be necessary at a national level.
Marlo and John have their hands up, but in the interest of time, if you'd like to add your questions to the chat, we can collect those and we can answer them afterwards.
Transition to budget.
I think we're ready. And
Okay.
Laura, you should be a co-host.
Okay. We're a tag team in this. And we did not rehearse the tag team ahead of time. So,
I am confident.
oh yes. Oh, yeah. That is magic. So wanted to just share a little bit about where we are in the budget process and then get some feedback from you, kind of priorities and your perspectives on it. I'm going to try and move through this relatively quickly, just because we are getting started a little bit later than the agenda showed. But so just I'll move next slide.
Yeah, sorry, no, I had something pop up, so I got momentarily distracted trying to make it go away. There we go.
So we'll do a quick overview of the budget process, a snapshot of the city, so we can all have kind of the same shared context. Quick look at the 6-year financial forecast, kind of that long-range forecast resources we anticipate having. Overview of the policy framework, do a little bit about revenues, talk a little bit about potential revenue options, get some input on that, and then a Q&A. So again, try to move relatively quickly.
I've got a sticky keyboard. All right. Next one.
Okay. Process, it's not on the slide, just for all of our shared understanding. One of my responsibilities, in addition to hiring the police chief and the other directors, is to prepare and recommend a biennial budget to the city council. And the way we do that here in the city of Vancouver is early in every even numbered year. We start working with the city council in the kind of late first quarter, sit down with them with a preliminary forecast of what resources we think we'll have over the long term, have a conversation about policy priorities. I formulate that into a recommended policy framework that then guides budget development. I do that work with the leaders across the organization and our subject matter experts within the city, as well as informed through these kinds of engagements, as well as other tools, community survey, the prioritization tool that we have online, and then these kinds of face-to-face conversations.
There's your slide.
Oh,
We're
there
out
it
of
is.
order.
There it is. I already covered that, but I will say the budget has two primary components: an operating budget, which is mostly composed of programs, salaries, expenses, those kinds of things, and a capital budget, which are things that we build. This is a quick snapshot of the schedule through the summer. We're doing public input by law. I have to deliver that recommended budget to the city council by October 1st, and then we target adoption before Thanksgiving gets here. And so just a little bit of a snapshot about the city organization, just to help calibrate all of us. We're a full service city. It's use quotes full service because we've already talked today about service deficiencies that we have. I mean, there's a lot of needs in the community and we're growing quickly. We have about 1,200 authorized employees. I say authorized because all those positions aren't full. We heard some examples of the police vacancies that we have, but we have that in other areas of the city too. So today, we have probably about 100 vacancies citywide. We're not immune to the labor issues that the whole rest of the economy is experiencing. So the current authorized is just a hair less than our 2008 peak authorization for FTEs. We're serving about 35,000 more people, which is about the population of Campus Solution combined. So, just to give you a sense of scale, our incorporated population as of April of this year, 197,600. We serve directly through fire and EMS, as well as sewer and water service. We serve about 290,000 people. And when you look at that population, we are comfortably the second largest direct service municipal provider in this. Second largest in the metro area. You heard that from Chief Moore earlier too. The next largest is Gresham at 114,000. We're actually the second largest city between Tacoma and Sacramento on the I-5 corridor. Yeah. The next largest on that stretch is Eugene, fourth largest in the state of Washington, quickly gaining on Spokane and Tacoma. About half of our residents in Vancouver are renters. Median household income is about just a hair shy of $62,000. If you look at how that compares to other kind of increments in the metro area, Clark County's median household income is about 75, Portland Metro 78, state of Washington 73. So Vancouver has a little bit lower level of household income than the area that is around us. That's reflected in some of the numbers. So we're seeing swift employment growth in Clark County. Much of that is in Vancouver because we're the biggest kind of economic center in Clark County, but employment grew almost 3 times faster than the nation as a whole and 58% faster than the state of Washington. So about 240,000 jobs at the end of 2021. That was 10,000, supposed to be 10,000 more than 2018. That's a countywide number. Again, in the city of Vancouver, we account for about 40% of that, so about 100,000 jobs in the city of Vancouver. Interestingly, there are more jobs in the city of Vancouver than there are working age people living in the city of Vancouver. It's the kind of commute dynamic that sets us off balance. So we're becoming a lot more diverse and quickly. If you look back a couple of decades, we were about 18.5% BIPOC. It's almost 30% in 2020. You look at our K-12 school population, it's about 47% BIPOC. So that really, combined with a lot of our experience over the last couple of years, has really trusted equity and inclusion and achieving greater social justice as priorities. So this is just a graphic version of that population growth over 2010 and there. As we look at, remember earlier, I said we need to build 2,500 housing units a year just to close our gap. 2,500 housing units, it's about 7,000 people every year. We've been growing at about 4,000 to 5,000 a year for the last several years. So that we anticipate that growth to continue. So looking at this is the long range forecast. So it goes from 2018 through 2028. This is what we call a current law forecast, which means it takes what we're doing today and assumes we're just going to continue doing that with the same number of people at the same level. It's a declining level because we have more and more people living in the city that we have to serve. It's kind of it incorporates inflation and you know kind of just continue on with the current law. It also has assumptions relative to what the economy is going to do because a lot of our revenues are economy dependent. But you can see that if we just keep doing what we're doing, the next biennium looks pretty good. Between 23-24 biennium, we have about a $14 million one-time opportunity to invest. I say one time because it disappears in 2025, and then we go negative in 26, and then we're down to in 27, 28, 6 to 7 million a year below. So that is the snapshot of this, what we call the structural deficit, which is the basic revenue structure in the state of Washington that cities rely on, doesn't keep up with inflation and growth. So we live within our means on every biennium, and we try to make sure we're planning for that with our eyes on that long-term horizon and recognizing if we get too ambitious today, the bill's going to come due at some point. We're going to need to take care of that. So I do want to also emphasize, you'll see it says general street and fire forecast. Our overall budget includes utilities, sewer, water, drainage, garbage, those things. Those are enterprises. They are fee for service. So you write your utility bill check every month that goes into the utility and it's used exclusively for utility operations and service. The general street and fire fund, that's where your tax dollars go. And those are general services like streets, fire, police, parks, the planning services we provide, those kinds of things that you think of as general government services. So we focus most of our effort on the general street and fire fund because that's where we have the least control over what the revenue looks like because it's most economy dependent, and where we have the greatest latitude to make decisions to either modify our level of service or enhance services in particular areas. The utilities, very fixed, it's $1 into the utility has to be $1 spent by the utility for that service. So in working with the city council, this has been consistent really since the 2020, the onset of the pandemic. There's these global policy themes, universal policy themes that they want to see imbued in everything that we're doing. That's really focusing on community safety, equity and inclusion in everything that we do, and climate action in everything. And they all overlap to some degree. I think we can all use our imaginations and see where climate action is going to contribute to community safety, and community safety is going to contribute to equity and inclusion, vice versa. So these are the universal policy themes that really are that umbrella over everything else. These also span the full forecast period, so well beyond the current biennium that we're in or the one we're planning for. They go over that long. So when we focus on the biennium, so the 23-24 biennium, there's a series of policy priorities in a framework that guide my development of a recommended budget. That are the 5 here, and then the commonality of meeting the needs of the growing community. So it's about reducing our carbon footprint, growing economic opportunity in the community, improving community safety and well-being, building exceptional public spaces and places, and improving equity and inclusion. So just a couple of little representative examples of what those are. Look at reducing our carbon footprint. It includes investing in our street system to provide more opportunities for active mobility. Example of the image there is transit service, looking at it, strategic investments in parking that help manage that system to reduce trips and vehicle reliance, and of course investments in transit partnering with C-Train. It also includes implementation of our climate action plan, which is going to be before the city council next month. For them to consider formally, a lot of that puts early priority on municipal operations, investing in our facilities, in our assets and our operations so that we can reduce our own carbon footprint, and we can lead by example by embracing and modeling the kind of leading edge practices that are reflected in that plan, and we can learn from that as well. It also, a huge part of it is our land use policy. So the reducing our carbon footprint is not only a near-term essential, but a long-term endeavor. And one of the biggest contributing factors to success there is having a land use pattern, land use policy that facilitates a smaller carbon footprint for the city. We look at growing economic opportunity. Just some representative things there are us making strategic investments in infrastructure that support job creation, support economic opportunity in the community. It can also mean investing in urban redevelopment. We talked a bit about the heights here as well. That creates more housing options and also more economic opportunity for members of the community. Also investing in housing and homelessness programs that help lift people out of the place that they're on in the overall economic ladder. Community safety and well-being. I think police, we spent a bit of time talking about that already this evening. Fire, we want to be very diligent about implementing the promises that were made with Proposition 2. And we're already gearing up to do the hiring and get the designs underway for fire stations there. And then also this is overlap piece on economic opportunity at community well-being is that homelessness and the community services. You start to see how these things all relate to one another, right? It's a system of investments that we want to make in programs and projects. So as we look at community improving safety and well-being, that includes transportation mobility. We talked a little bit about the fourth plane project. The number one reason why we're engaged in that is safety. It is an incredibly unsafe corridor for anyone who is not in a car. And so making those investments, targeted locations throughout the city, data-driven investments that improve the safety there, making sure that our water utilities, it's one of the paramount responsibilities that we have, is safe, reliable drinking water, that we're investing in that system to ensure its resiliency and its quality. And then looking at our park system, which I think folks here have heard me on multiple occasions talk about how we have an accumulated backlog of deferred maintenance in our parks that actually contributes to some of them being unsafe. And we can make strategic investments in those to improve their safety, not only the facility itself, but also safety through the lens of crime and law enforcement. And then when we look at maintaining, building and maintaining exceptional public places and spaces, that is our parks, trails, cultural facilities. I mentioned earlier the potential adaptive reuse of the old library building. That's another opportunity for an exceptional place. The Heights and the Central Civic Plaza and the Heights and the amenities that are included in that, those are exceptional places. And then looking at our civic buildings, we've got investment in fire facilities. We're moving towards a police training and administration facility. We have an opportunity to partner with the state on a regional training facility. And also this complements our climate action goals. As we make these investments in civic facilities, we can demonstrate leadership and results through our climate action goals as well. And then the streets one is, it's our single largest asset by acreage, by value, and it's one that everyone uses every day, all the time. And so how can we invest in our street system so that they become exceptional places for the community to use beyond just being a vehicle? And then improving equity and inclusion. And this is, it's hard to articulate how important this is and how essential it is to be integrated in the DNA of everything that we do at the city. But some examples are assuring that our governance systems are representative, both supporting the city council in that role, but also looking at our boards and commissions, our community-based governance models, so that we have a broad cross-section and in particular historically underrepresented voices in those. If our services are accessible to everyone in the community, particularly those who need particular investments or accommodations, that we're proactive in providing those in a best practice kind of way. And that when we look to make investments in services and programs and projects that we do, that we're doing that informed by data about the composition of the community, as well as our historic investment patterns. So that, again, acknowledged earlier that the floor plan area is one that has been passed over by investment, both from the marketplace as well as from the city for decades. And that's an opportunity for us to make an investment in an area that lifts that community up. It doesn't displace that community, so that they can continue to enjoy the benefits of those investments and not just have gentrification displace them. So that was a quick run through before getting into the poll. I do want to say, I think frequently when we talk about budget, people expect us to talk about numbers. I did a little bit of numbers, but it's mostly about policies. And that's because the budget really is first and foremost a policy priority. The numbers follow that, right? And frankly, the numbers, if we get into those, I'm happy to do that, not tonight, but I'm happy to do that with anyone on your time. But the numbers can get mind-numbing, confusing, a little Byzantine, that they are required to be that way in part by state law. But it's really about policy priorities, what's important, and then we draft the numbers behind what's important. So that's why you didn't see a whole lot of numbers in a presentation about that. So this is your.
All right, my cue. So I see many of you are grabbing your phones already. So if you grab your phone or your laptop and type in minty.com, enter the code, and when I switch the slide, it should go to the poll for us. So I will say we're experimenting with this. So there we go. I didn't mean to look over your shoulder, but I'm just making sure it's working.
Working.
Good. We're experimenting with this. So I appreciate you going along on the experiment with us. I'm hoping as soon as you guys start voting, the results should populate. Has everybody been able to get into the poll? There we go. So far, 3 folks have been able to complete it. Next time I'll bring Gracie with me and she can tell us how to do it. That's my 13-year-old. Then I think you guys are doing pretty well.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you, Glenn. It's a week for trying new things. We've got about 10 responses. So, William, how many people are on the call? And then I can definitely see who's in the room. So I want to get a gauge if we should.
We're done.
So as people wrap up, I'll give a little bit of context. So we're going to be doing a similar poll like this in all the different groups that Eric and the deputy city managers visit. We'll take all of those results along with, we'll get to this later, but we also have an online tool where people can go and do a similar exercise as well. We'll roll all that data up for Eric to help inform his decisions as he develops the budget. So that's what we're going to be using, this information, and then the information we have out on our Beaver page. So it's more than just a fun exercise in the room. We're actually going to take your data and give it to Eric. So you can have that. It works on the budget. So what do you think, Eric?
Well, first of all, it's cool. This is the first time I've seen this done. So very cool. So it's not surprising. Pretty consistently, safety and well-being emerges as top priority, really in any community, and particularly right now, where we are either experiencing personally or seeing in our neighborhoods the impact of some of the criminal activity we heard the chief talk about a little bit earlier today. I'm a little surprised that the carbon footprint was fine. But that's the whole thing, learning. And
I have a question. So you mentioned the ECHO as a collaborative with, is that something where that could be a resource to really look at a jail? I know with what we're seeing, I mean, that is at the top of people's brains. They're hearing about the ghetto down here at Franklin, and so what do you think? And then you may not be able to comment tonight.
I actually can. So just for the benefit of folks that are here and still on the line, the jail is owned and operated by the county, and the city is a customer. So our folks who are convicted, who are members of the Vancouver community, they go to the jail. Right now, it is pretty much exclusively felons in the jail. And frankly, most of them are, it's limited to folks who are really dangerous felons because of capacity constraints there. So the county did convene a group of stakeholders in 2018-19. Yeah, so right before the pandemic, I participated in that. There was actually a recommendation to replace the jail. The county council at that time did not move it forward, but rather referred it to the Law Enforcement Council, which is a statutorily required group of law enforcement and criminal justice folks. And that is currently chaired by Councillor Gary Medvichy. And there has been some recent conversations about that group taking on, kind of picking up on the jail conversation where it left off. So the ECHO is really intended to be focused on homelessness, and jails are much, I think there's a role in the ecosystem that the chief described that the jail plays that could have an influence on homelessness. But I don't think it's a central feature of homelessness. But I do think that there's a path for the jail to move forward if the county council wants to. And I genuinely believe that they understand that it's a priority. It needs to happen. It's huge. It's a huge investment. And that's a daunting thing for anybody. So thanks. So
Eric,
I just want to point out that neighborhoods fit each one of those 5 categories.
Yes.
So a lot of money should be spent on neighborhoods.
Yes.
Okay.
And so Alicia's laughing there. So we've developed tools to look at neighborhoods through a new lens, where we're looking at social vulnerability by neighborhoods. So we can say, well, Columbia Shores, probably not so vulnerable, but Rose Village may be vulnerable. I mean, so let's look at those kinds of risk factors, and then how can we direct program and capital investments to neighborhoods that may be vulnerable in a way that lifts them up, but again, without displacing. And that's the key.
you want to go on to the, oh, sorry.
Well, and I think about just the North Plain Border transportation project. It touches on every one of those elements. So projects that have that sort of a potential impact seem to want to look at the top of the screen and say, this is really one that's going to point out big time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I really appreciate you bringing that up, because it really illustrates that for a conversation like this, we need to put it out there as how do you rank each of these buckets? But the reality is they're all connected, right? So an investment in safety and well-being also can reduce our carbon and can improve equity. And so it's how do we optimize the investment to get the max out of all of these? But if we have a forced choice, we get to a place where, okay, we got a critical investment we need to make in this area, then this gives, when we look at all the data in the aggregate, we can say, well, number one thing is that the community is looking for that safety and well-being, which includes the sampling of kinds of things. So that helps guide, kind of where the numbers track.
I think the other thing it does, Eric, is it provides you a means to start to address some structural inconsistencies, and particularly take a look at a particular place. So this all has to be grounded in place and activities in that place. But what are the drivers of the community breaking down, and what are the investments that are going to speed up the recovery or with restoration.
Yeah, and relying on people to pick up that community to say, here's what we need, not us saying, here's what you, right?
Yeah, and I think aligned with that is, and I see the city doing a better and better job of this. How do we mobilize the community to have a hand in this as well? Because this isn't a solution that just the city has. And how does the community itself, how does the neighborhood play a role?
A term that I hadn't been using much or had much exposure to, but been using a lot more lately is co-creation, right? So how do we create this out together? The one thing so this carbon footprint is at the bottom here. I think folks may be aware we have an incredibly aggressive and ambitious carbon reduction goal of carbon neutrality by 2040. It's among the most aggressive in the nation. In order to achieve that, we have to move fast. And so I mentioned earlier that we want to ask folks, what do you need? At the same time, if we're to achieve some of these things, we'll need to move really quickly. And the tension we need to resolve is how do we make sure we're going together far quickly? And when you add all these things up, remember I talked earlier about to address housing, we got to build 2,500, roughly grow twice as fast as we are today. In order to achieve some of the carbon stuff and safety stuff, we need to start to accelerate transforming our transportation mobility system. And if we are looking at addressing community safety issues, we need to be able to appropriately resource some of those core safety services. And you add all those things up, and they equal potentially transformative changes in a short period of time, when we've already felt like we've been experiencing transformative changes, right? So there's a change management piece in here too. How do we navigate that path? So.
But I think that's the tension sometimes. One of the things that I hear a lot is, how does Vancouver stay uniquely Vancouver? But then if the state mandates a certain agenda and Portland, pushes their bully thing, Vancouver still has to say, you know what, this is our city, this is our community, and stand strong, So it's a tough tension, right?
Chief and I were just literally over lunch today talking about how do we, this is a special place. How do we keep it a special place?
Right.
Recognize that we're going to continue to evolve and change as a community, but what's that kind of core thread of Vancouver? So I want to be aware of time and move to.
Sorry, I got lost in the chat. Oops, I can get my
Tell
screen.
Glenn to keep this.
So when we talked to the council earlier this year about the overall kind of policy framework and those priorities, it's the foundation of what we just walked through. They also said they would consider potential revenues. Really there's a wide range of revenues that can be overwhelming actually when you look at all the list of them and how they all work. So really want to focus on a few areas and get a sense of the purpose-driven revenues. So want to say, that if we have specific purpose for these, what is the perspective from the community on, what those revenues would be? And this is just a sampling of, purposes could be economic development, well-being and safety, cultural parks, trails, transportation, mobility, those kinds of things. And on the other side, revenue options that are within the council's authority to enact. So these are not ones that not go to voters, but that the council can enact on their own. $10 license tabs. The city currently has a $40 license tab out there, so there's another $10 increment. There's also the potential of a 1/10 of a cent sales tax for transportation that the council could impose. And maybe there's a trade-off there where some of the license tab comes off, but there's a sales tax comes on. Commercial parking tax is something that looked at as a way to maybe invest in alternate modes of transportation. And that would apply to commercial parking facilities, right? Most of which are in downtown, but there's some in other places. And then the business license surcharge reform. And that really is looking at, currently it's a very kind of a flat fee, applies to everyone with some incentives, relief for the largest businesses. We want to reform that so that it actually favors smaller businesses and it has a more progressive structure so that smaller businesses pay less per head, larger businesses pay more. And we have an environment that really recognizes 95% of all employment in the city of Vancouver is small size businesses, local small businesses. So, but there's some potential of maybe up to 5 million that could be through that kind of a more progressive structure. So that's just a snapshot. And then
Laptop,
Eric, is it fair to call the affordable housing fund a purpose-driven revenue option?
It is, but it's voter approved, and
Right.
these are all, yeah. So just some kind of questions. Those are the 4 general tools that could be used, and some questions about who pays. Should the user pay? Like the vehicle license tabs, that's a user payments, right? If you have a car, you pay the fee, it goes towards roads. Should there be some sort of a rational nexus between the tax and what it's used for? Because some of these, like business license surcharge, can be used for anything. And currently they're used, what we collect now is used for transportation and police. That's all it's used for. So, and then broad base or more focused. And then when we look at growth, some of these, like the license tabs, it grows with every household, but it doesn't grow with inflation, right? So as we see cost of building things go up, then the buying value of that goes down. Whereas the sales tax actually does include inflation because the price of goods inflated. So some of those things. And then the equity, flat fees are pretty regressive. Almost all taxes in Washington State are regressive. It's a terrible tax system, but that's the one we got. So, but a flat fee, tends to be more regressive, whereas should we look at more progressive structures? So, and then really out of a threshold question of, we pay attention. Inflation's high. You hear the news about recession, and is there's some combination? None, no new taxes, all of them. I mean, so it's really just kind of what's the sense of this? And this is the first time we're trying out this conversation, so it's pretty loose. But so open it up for thoughts or questions.
It's gotta be hard coming on, COVID.
Yeah.
And the little resurgence, and everybody's like, oh God, is it coming? And you gotta keep that in mind when you're talking about raising costs, because nobody's working.
Yeah.
That's gonna be hard, but you have to find some way to make up that projected deficit. Because the city of Vancouver has always, since I've lived here, and been involved.
Which is
I'll say that, yeah.
long time.
Yeah.
Since I've lived here,
Yeah.
people have been involved.
Yeah. You pay as you go.
Yeah.
And that's very smart.
One of the things I liked about the framework, Eric, is that it ties you to some means of accountability. Because it suggests that there is going to be a change in an outcome, an improved outcome, a return on investment, however that gets measured. And I'm involved with the Affordable Housing Fund Renewal Committee right now. And I think the biggest miss so far has been telling the story of the return on investment. And here we have a tax that it may be beneficial to maybe look at way we might structure that, but we have limitations in terms of how much we can do that. But I think for the message to get out, because we're coming up on the sunset of that first round. And for 60% of the people who said, yeah, we think the city ought to take a bold move, because it is a very bold move. I mean, it's not typical for municipalities to invest themselves like this. And I think the return on investment has been extraordinary, the things that have been delivered. And we just had a short run through on that. Those stories need to be told. And I think that is a great example of demonstrating why a purpose-driven sort of a framework is really a merit, because it gets people to start thinking about, what do I really want here? And are these investments delivered? And I think we learned a tremendous amount of things out of this first round with their affordable housing fund. But we learned mostly that there's a heck of a lot more we could have, would have, should have done if we'd have been a little bold. And so that, you know, you got to give people something to hang their hat on. And to me, I think you're bringing it all back full circle to really what's important here. And you should be able to demonstrate how these respond to those 5 elements that are, and then you can start to differentiate between different settings. Will we do it here? Will we do it there? You know, because we know the metrics are in each of those categories are going to move depending on what their circumstances in that particular setting are. So this is a good step.
Maybe a direct question, particularly around the sales tax, because the sales tax in Vancouver is now 8.5, and next week it might be 6, because the county's sales tax is on the ballot. And then one of the tools here is 1/10 of a cent for transportation, which could get it to 8.7. What's your perspective on sales tax getting up to that level? I mean, it's over 10 in Seattle. It's 9.8, I think, in Tacoma. So other parts of the state, it's higher. Other parts of the state is lower too. I think it's 7.7 in Whitman County. So
I don't think we have any choice.
Yeah.
Because, you know, we're in a unique position when it comes to tax revenue.
Yeah.
People are going across the river like crazy.
Not as much as they were.
Yeah,
I
it's
mean,
getting better.
Yeah, it's getting better. Yeah.
Because they can't get over this bridge.
And the pandemic.
Yeah.
So,
But, yeah,
one of the things that I've thought about the sales taxes, you know, we are, particularly when we think about it for streets, we're a hub of economic activity for the whole county. And we draw a little bit from Portland, but, and so currently, the way we invest in streets is almost exclusively from people who are living in the city of Vancouver. You know, they have cars registered here. We get a little bit of vehicle excise tax or fuel excise tax, but there are users of our street system that come in from all over the county, and a sales tax would make them payers too, and so it would capture some of that. Yeah, in one way, sales tax is horribly regressive, but at least it captures a broader base of payers who are using the service. So, and if there was a way to do that and maybe roll back the license tabs, then that starts to equalize things. It still moves us forward.
You know, some of these things like Chief was talking about, this technology advances where you can actually start to track and monitor use in it. You think those are going to be some tools in the future that are going to help us to sort out who's paying it? How do we capture it? It's a tough structure we have.
That has his hand, but I also just wanted to acknowledge that it is 9:00.
Oh, it is.
Did you have a question or a comment you want to share?
Yeah, but I forgot what it was. I apologize.
You know where we are. So,
Yeah.
That's what happens.
So I'll ask, is this useful conversation for you? Yes, it sure was for me. And it was one of our first ones, so it's a good learning opportunity too. That's great. Well, thank you. Thank you very much.
1 second.
I think this is part of that tag team. Thank you. All right. There we go. So there's a place where you can learn more. Whoops. Not quite yet. We've set up the Be Heard page on the budget. So you'll find there the budget schedule, information about where tax dollars go, and more at Be Heard. And then also too, you can take, if you know, after this entire conversation, and if you had some more thoughts about it, feel free to take the exercise again. Please tell your neighborhood association members or your groups that this page is there as well, and that the exercise is there. We've been sending it out through a variety of channels, social media, our website, the media. So we've been getting pretty good response so far, but we would love to get that participation even higher. It will be open through August 22nd. And
Or the Be Heard?
the Be Heard, I'll get to the phone one in just a second. But yeah, that's a very great good segment. So wanted to let you know that we are going to be doing our community survey. We do the community survey here in Vancouver about every 2 years to coincide with the biennial budget process. It will be a combination survey because it's going to be a phone survey as well. It's going to be a text to web survey because we know not everybody has a landline anymore. We know even if you do, we know you're not going to pick up that phone. People are on their cell phones. So we're going to be calling people in a variety of places to try to reach them, whether it's through their landline at their home, whether it's through their cell phone number, or whether it's through text. We've engaged with DHM, which is a very reputable local survey firm who's done surveys for many municipalities, other jurisdictions. So we're really excited to have them on board with this.
Is this them reaching out to us, or is there an option that we can call in and?
No, this is strictly, they're going to be reaching out to residents. It's going to be random statistic valid samples. So they're going to be generating those numbers and contacts from the voter rolls. The other way that they have a way of reaching folks is they have a system where they do random dial, where they're able to generate random numbers. We've also asked them to really make sure that the survey is representative of the community. So they're going to make sure that we get our results from all areas of the community. We've given them our zip code map. We've given them our GIS shape map. So it's really important that we're getting people from throughout the community. It's also important to us that we represent the diversity in the community as well. So they have certain, for lack of a better term, quotas set around that as well to also make the survey more accessible. We have it available in English, Spanish, Russian, and Vietnamese. So if we wind up, if the survey firm winds up calling somebody who needs a different language, we can accommodate that. And then of course we will publish the results on the website, as well as they will also be rolled up to Eric to help inform his budget decisions. But so that's another thing too. If you wouldn't mind, encourage your neighborhood associations, if they do get that call, if they do get that text from the survey firm, please encourage them to pick up or respond to the text. They are going to be identifying themselves as working for us. So if you are one of the ones that get the text message, you will see our city word mark on it. So you'll know that it is legit. Same thing, I believe it's the same thing with the call. So yeah, so really hope that that you're able to participate if you do get that call.
Laura, is it possible that you could generate a simple little package that you could send out to the association that we could distribute?
Yes.
I think that would be awesome because, you know, you packaged a whole lot. There's no way I'm going to articulate it like you have. But for you to send something to the association and say, would you distribute this out on your networks and encourage people?
Definitely. I've written a rather robust, frequently asked questions that we're going to be publishing up on our website the next day. So I'll make sure you have that along with the news release that really encompasses everything about the survey. So definitely, and I'll make sure you have the information about the third page as well. So I'll work on that and get that out.
Piggyback on your.
Really appreciate that. And that is it.
Thank you for sweating it out.
You know, I almost felt a blast cooler. So it must be time to go home.
Yeah.
Every now and
Put it on the budget.
And just in closing, before we go, Judy, just wanted to invite Judy Bailey, our coordinator for lots of neighborhoods, to stand a few words.
Hi, everyone. Thank you all for being here tonight. I want to give a special thanks to Tracy and William for filling in for me at the last minute. I'm sorry I couldn't be there in person to be with all of you. But I wanted to tell you that I'm planning to retire from the city at the end of this week. So I will have, this month I had 30 years with the city. So I'm looking forward to that, but I will miss all of you. And I want to tell you all what an inspiration you are to me, your dedication to our community, your willingness to come to these meetings and listen and learn and ask really good questions. It's such an inspiration to me. Special thank you to everyone who's in the room where our air conditioning is not working 100% and sticking it out. But thank you all. It's been a pleasure to work with all of you.
Thank you so much, Judy. Just to let the group know, plans for our upcoming meeting. The next one will be on October 25th. So we've also got some questions about where we go next, because we have some big shoes to fill in Judy's position. And we know that we won't be able to replace Judy, but we're looking to find someone who has the same dedication, same passion, same commitment to neighborhoods that Judy has brought in her role over the last several years. And so that process is ongoing. And I may reach out to a few of you over the coming weeks. As we go through this hiring process, one of the things that's been guiding it thus far is trying to make sure that we're obviously meeting needs, thinking about the future of neighborhoods, and continuing that conversation that Eric mentioned tonight. So thank you all for staying involved. Look forward to talking to you soon.
Thank you, Judy.
Outside where it's nice and cool.
That was earlier. We went outside to come back. I'm filling in temporarily. Anytime. Just for the time being. Yeah, the time being. But what we're hoping.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, and I was there. So this one here, it's
The year before I got there.
there are 3 ways out of this room. With something, don't take a right.
Take my other way. Pleasure to meet you.
times have changed. Hey, congrats. Good to have you. Hector.
I don't have anybody.
So we'll see you on Monday.
Hey, Park.
Yeah.
I could see you guys pretty well. Did we feel integrated in the meeting at all?
I'm sorry, Glenn?
Did we feel integrated into the meeting? Or were we just kind of a mysterious voice that would pop up from time to time?
Did who make it in?
What's that?
Did who make it in?
Oh, never mind. Don't worry about it.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Have a good night.
All right, you too, Glenn. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, the NTSA, you can't be like. Because that's what it is, man. I'm gonna have to kill District 12 if I'm gonna let. Traffic lower anyway. Yes. Listen to me on the list. Don't say, oh, geez, it didn't put action plan. It's like, you can barely. Yeah, no, it's not. It's like, are you kidding me? We have time to get an area action plan. We don't have time to have meetings at the time. You want us to do an area action plan, just stop something?
Oh, yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, but every time it is, it discourages me. Yeah. Yeah. Took me 6 years. And I won 1 year, but I didn't have enough money. But you have to start again. Already won. Oh, no, you gotta apply again. And, oh.
Another year.
I'll talk to somebody.
They're gonna read it. Yeah, it should not be that way.
Well, that's like we do this like over the weekend.
Right. I think you have a something in there.
No, I go every day to go to work. I go there. Yeah.
The neighbors
I'm just, I've been in the city for a long time, but really just part of the neighbors. So,
Do you think Eric's coming back? He left his laptop.
Oh, I don't know. I'll take it up to his office.
I just take this up to you. This is what's on. Make a huge difference. Yeah, it's not just a list.
Yeah, you're welcome. You too.
That'll make a huge. That's good. Yeah, me too. Yeah. Yeah. I can't imagine it without. I can't, I mean. I've never had it. She's the reason. She's incredible. Judy.
Yeah.
Like an institution, so it'll be a transition, but I know we'll get through it. I know we will. We will. You will get
Oh,
through
yeah, we're
it.
gonna be fine.
Everybody is replaced.
Well,
Yeah. Everybody.
it's always hard when people leave,
Yeah.
and especially people that have been here for a long time. It's always hard to see people go.
Well, as I was sharing, because I was reviewing the application. And just, you know, folks who have. I love this.
Yeah.
And, you know, combination of every single school. Those are the things that are. What we're gonna do.
Anything I can do to help, I'm there, or to make the transition easier for the person, anything I.
Well, I think there'll be a lot of things.
Mhm.
Or it's learning, understanding from just the institution or the city.
Yeah.
And the great thing is, I don't think anyone who's going to be in that role.
Yeah.
Other value neighbors, so
Yeah.
we have kind of a.
Yeah.
You know, like, I won't
We
be there.
better have.
It's not going to be, you know, just Tracy and me in a meeting saying, you know, so there. But yeah, it'll be very good to get.
Thanks for doing this.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
one quick thing. You probably have my contact.
I have your contact info.
If you need anything at all, please feel free to call or text. Only thing is there's a work number on there. And, please feel free to always call or text.
Okay.
Because the work number is now shared. So that's our next one.
Yeah, I get that. You guys are really Sufficient.
We're trying. We're trying.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Thanks, Mary.
Bye.
Tracy, I was flashing back last week, so I was handing out cards. So when you asked me, you said, do you think you want both numbers on here?
Oh,
I said,
yes.
We'll be back in the office and, oh, sure.
I know.